Hello, I'm Karl Wells. This is Point to Point. My guest today is Dr. Douglas Dunsmore, a music educator in Newfoundland and Labrador for over 40 years. His last job at the Munn School of Music was as Director of Choral Studies. He also founded the Philharmonic Choir of the Newfoundland Symphony Orchestra. And he's done much, much more, which hopefully we'll find out about now. Hello, Doug.
Hi, Karl. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great to see you. Now, you came to us from Saskatchewan originally. I've heard that there are many similarities between the people of Saskatchewan. I don't know how do you say Saskatchewaners or
Saskatchewanians or
Saskatchewan?
People from Saskatchewan will do.
Well, I've heard there are similarities between people of Saskatchewan and Newfoundlanders in that I guess we're a rural culture primarily. We probably have similar views on the Confederation. Well, what is your take on that?
Well, my take on it is similar. When we moved here, we were taken. We moved out here. We got married on the 17th of August and got in the car on the 20th and started driving out here for my first university job. But the take was very similar in that farmers and fisher people, they seem to have to pit their wits against the weather and government and God, not necessarily in that order, but it's always something coming up that they have to do. So they're similar that way. And also, we found at home, and more so here because we were strangers when we came here, people here are tremendously friendly. They want to make you feel at home. They're a little bit cautious at first because they don't want really to hear about how great things were in Tirana or somewhere else. But if they think that you're going to invest in you here, then they're your pal. And it's the same thing as at home. What am I saying at home? I've lived here 40 years. The same thing out in Saskatchewan. And so the people are a lot, they're true blue, and once a friend is a friend for life.
Yeah. Tell me, what part of Saskatchewan did you come from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Regina, and basically born and bred in Regina, so that we were connected with farms a lot because my parents had a lot of friends who were farmers and all that sort of stuff. But I was born in Regina and centered around there because of the fact that Regina is part of Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan again is like Newfoundland. There are sort of two major centers, Regina, Saskatoon, and in some ways, I'm getting myself in trouble here if I say the two major centers are St. John's and Corner Brook, but the two population centers that people sort of rotate around.
Right.
And so we did spend some time in Saskatoon, never living there, but if there was going to be something musical that was going to happen often, it would happen in one place and then re-happen in the other.
Tell me about your family. Tell me about your siblings and your parents.
Well, my mom and dad, Dad was born in Bigger, Saskatchewan. They had this town the sign outside that says, New York is big, but this is bigger. That's with an AR, of course. And he was a farm boy growing up. My mom was born in Scotland, and her father was killed in sniper fire in World War I. And if that wasn't enough, her young brother, who was just an infant, died of the influenza epidemic, at which point her mom said, I'm done with this. I'm going out to my relatives in Canada. So off they went, and she ended up, I think they went to Winnipeg and ended up, and Mom and Dad met in a small town just north of Regina, and grew to love each other, of course, get married. But when they first started out, jobs were very slim, and so they were hired hands. They would work at farms as a couple, doing whatever they would from place to place. Spent several years doing that, made some very close friends doing that, and then my father had an opportunity to take over a trucking business, and so he got involved in hauling landscaping stuff back into Regina from all over, topsoil manure and building up things, and actually he was very, very actively involved when Regina built up Wascana Center, which is a gorgeous place around the legislative buildings. They required a huge amount of lawns and garden materials, and Dad spent, I can recall, 5 or 6 years when practically every trucker in the area was bringing things in to beautify. So that's what he was involved in, trucking, and Mom ran the phone and business part of the association of things. And of course, Mom was involved in all kinds of other things too, and she was the social of the two. Father was more of doing the work thing, but Mom was involved as an explorer leader and all kinds of things. My siblings, there was one boy, Glenn, who died in his infancy, but then my brother Barry was my oldest, around 10 years older than I, who made a career eventually in ABC News, and was in Paris, bureau chief in Paris for a while, and Rome for 7 years, and a little while in London, and eventually ended up in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I remember Barry Dunsmore very well, reporting for ABC Television News.
Yeah, he was very involved in that. He actually came back to Canada for a little while and was involved in I want to say Marketplace, but it was one of the shows that was investigating what goes on. It might not have been called that then, but then he was quickly rehired back into and worked for ABC. So he spent most of his working life with that. My middle brother, Lorne, is trained as a psychologist, and first of all graduated high school and did some other work, and suddenly realized that he really should have gone to school. So he went and he trained in psychology and became hugely involved in helping all kinds of people in Saskatchewan, especially in devising programs. He ran a couple of major health programs for the government at the time in Saskatchewan. He became a civil servant, and he was actually one of the people who he was in the think tank that invented the first farm helpline in Saskatchewan in the late 80s or early 90s, which was a huge boon to helping people in those times. So he's been retired now from that, but still can't help himself by helping others and doing those sorts of things.
So who else in your family had an interest in music besides yourself?
Mom, especially. Mm-hmm. Mom played the organ. She played piano, but she then played the organ in a little church just about 20 miles away. I think it was sort of in the borough of Tregarva, I believe is where it was. And she played organ there, and then she played organ in another couple of little churches around in the area where she was growing up, because her mom had moved in with the Campbell clan, who had a farm not very far from home, but also really good friends of hers and Dad's before they were married and after also lived in that area. So when we came along years later, we used to go out and spend a lot of time visiting those folks. And we're pseudo farm kids, but not really. We're still city slickers as far as that went.
How were your school years?
My school years were really interesting. We were living in a place, it was post-war, and so there were, I guess, kids my age were everywhere, apparently. I started off at a school called Kitchener School.
So this is the 50s?
This is the 50s, yeah. I would have been this would have been mid-50s. I would have been going first grade school, kindergarten, grade 1. And went to a place called Kitchener School, and I was always, I couldn't help myself. I was always singing, and encouraged, of course, by Mom. But I sang in an amateur night, and one of the teachers said, "You ought to have that recorded." And I said, "Okay." I didn't know. And so he made a recording of me singing, "My new shoes shine like everything," and "Squeak, squeak, squeak when I walk." And the other one was, "If I can help somebody." And he made a recording of it.
Ed Ames made a big hit out of that one.
No kidding. Yeah. Wow, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we couldn't play it at home because we didn't have a record player, as it turns out. But eventually we could.
Eventually, you made the decision that you were going to make a life in music. But why choral music and why conducting?
Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to your introduction of me. I really like the fact that you called me a music educator, because that's what I feel I am. Conducting is part of it. And I wasn't actually thinking about becoming a musician. I was very strongly heading towards the idea of maybe becoming a United Church minister. But in high school, the person who was teaching at the time, John Harding, he was only at our school for a year. He was a magnificent fellow, great musician, and he just was one of these people where you wanted to do things for him. Anyway, I had just been elected as music person for the next year, which doesn't mean a whole lot, except he thought, well, you like to sing, and you're going to be the music director next year. I said, well, yeah, I guess. Well, next spring, coming up, I've got to go and play. He was a trumpeter. I've got to go and play in somewhere down in the States, and I can't be here for graduation weekend. So what I'd like you to do is conduct the graduation choir. I said, I guess I could do that. I could learn how to be there. He said, no, he said, I want you to form it, rehearse with it, and then conduct it. You know, they're all your friends are all 1 year ahead of you. You take care of it. I said, well, I thought about it, okay. I said, well, can I have Mrs. Chisholm play? Because she was the accompanist at the time. He said, certainly, Mrs. Chisholm, will you play? Yes, I'll play. So I spent, I don't know, I guess it was maybe 4 or 5 or 6 weeks meeting with these students, most of whom were my pals who were graduating a year ahead of me. And we sang, and the feeling of working and making these sounds and get the evocative response that I felt from them and that we felt from the audience, I was blown away. I thought, this is really something. This is, a person could do this. And it turns out that's what I ended up going to do.
So where did you get your degrees? Was that in Saskatchewan as well?
First, yes. They had something that was called a Bachelor of Music, a Bachelor of Education, but they were changing gears while I was involved. So what I did graduate with was a Bachelor of Music Education. So more or less the 70s I spent in Regina, working at Martin Collegiate, also working on my master's degree, which I finished around 75 or 6, and having a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like you had plenty of experience and credentials to go then to the next level of teaching, which is university level, and then in 1979 you get the appointment to Memorial. How did that come about?
Well, it's very interesting. Come about is exactly is how I would describe it, because I was happy enough working with the high school things in Saskatchewan, and also I had been asked to do a couple of large choirs to sing for the Queen on the 75th anniversary of Saskatchewan's entrance and all that sort of stuff, and started working with the Philharmonic Choir there. But the chamber choir, I was the assistant conductor of the chamber choir because I was working on my master's at U of R. We came on tour to Newfoundland in 1976. And we sang at the Canadian National Music Educators Convention. And the major concerts were at the Arts and Culture Centre, which was a beautiful building and still is now, especially now that it's redone. And we sang here, and we went on tour. I think we went as far as Grand Falls. We were a choir of about 18, and we had a wonderful time. And it was fun, and we met people, and of course, Newfoundlanders make it their job to be sure that this is the best place you've ever visited, by gosh. And that's how we went home thinking that. And about a year and a half later, there was an advertisement in the paper saying that D.F. Cook was taking, well, they didn't say he was taking sabbatical, but I found out that's what it was, that there was a 1-year choral replacement job here. And my mentor from U of R, Vern Sanders, called and he said, you should apply for that job. I said, nah, I can't get that job. He said, send in an app. Go ahead, do it. So I did. And we had a couple of telephone conversations with Cook. And he said, okay, you're hired. I said, oh, okay. I'd like to come out and see the place. What's the matter with you? You're hired. You don't have to come out and see the place. I said, no, I'd just like to come out. Well, come out if you want. So I came out on St. John's Day weekend in '79. Flew out, well, actually almost all the way out, and then had to take the bus from Gander because it was foggy. It was good training. and got to meet people that I'd be working with and see the library and see the place and say, this will be really fun. So I was able to go home, order music that I thought I would be able to use over the year, and came out here. And as Cook said, he said, that's a one-year job. That's it. That's all there is. I said, yeah, it's okay with me. It's fine. 1 year is good. So we came out, and in the course of the year, we had a good year. A lot of good things happened, not the least of which was that our chamber choir finished first in the chamber choir category of a brand spanking new CBC contest called the CBC Canadian Choral Competition. And we won first place in the chamber choir division, which surprised the heck out of me. And actually had a lot to do with my later development as a conductor. But at the end of the year, we packed up our little duds and had a great, wonderful send-off, and hated to leave. It was such fun. But drove back to Saskatchewan and went back to our old jobs. And about 6 or 7 months later, I got a note from Maureen Volk, actually, who said, we're going to hire a choral person here next year. And I said, oh, really? So I applied and got out. So that's how I ended up here. And the real reason for doing it, after coming out for a year, it wasn't that the experience was that much better in some ways, but for 10 or 12 years I had worked with high school boys. And working with university men, I could sing. We could sing anything with real loud, sort of full voice stuff. And that's what really turned the corner for me, to be able to work with a more, it's like working with a piano and going to a pipe organ. There's just more, there's more possibilities. So that's what sort of brought us out here.
Did you realize that you're not the first person from Saskatchewan to make his mark in the Newfoundland music scene?
Well,
have you heard of Omar Blondell?
Actually, I had not, but I looked him up when you sent it to me. Holy smoke! This person, the Gerald S. songbook became his Bible.
That's right.
He went off. But he was right. Surely you've got a bunch of these recorded. Nope.
Yeah. He was the first person to record all of these Newfoundland folk songs.
Yeah, it was amazing.
He made a tremendous contribution.
Oh yeah, yeah, and a lot of those have been used in, spreading the word on how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was an interesting.
It is an interesting story.
Little tidbit that you might enjoy.
I did. I enjoyed reading up about it.
Yeah.
But I hadn't known about it before.
No.
Or maybe if I did, I mean, when I looked it up, then I said, "Oh, it's that guy." But I had never made the Saskatchewan connection. Yeah. It was this person. Yeah.
Now, of course, Don Cook is legendary in Newfoundland.
He is.
The D.F. Cook Recital Hall. Yep. He's really responsible, I guess, for getting the music school going.
Oh,
largely
absolutely.
It was Don Cook's doing. What kind of an impression did he make on you?
Well,
he's a bit of a curmudgeon.
Oh, sure, but he works at that.
Yeah.
He works at the curmudgeon thing. He and I became fast friends, but not without butting heads a few times, because I was this young whippersnapper, and he was going to be sure to tell me that there were certain things whippersnappers could do and certain things that we couldn't. But the real thing about being interested about here, the position that I was able to come to the first year was a grown-up, taught choral music for 15, 20 years kind of position. All the choirs, all the classes that related to choir, all that sort of stuff, because that's what Don did. So there was festival choir, the great big choir of 250, chamber choir, all that sort of stuff. It was magic. And I knew, or I thought I knew, well, I'll never luck into this again, so this was really, really fine. But when Don left and came back and looked around, he sort of gleaned things. He's very sharp about figuring out what might work and what might not. And he gleaned from other people that I had really enjoyed working with festival choir. Festival choir was the big one. And I had been doing choirs at home in Regina several times. I was rehired for Saskatchewan's 100th year celebration, and once more, it was a TV special, and
was this
by
the 2005?
This is the 2005 one, and I got to conduct a wonderful choir, go over the choir and meet them and rehearse with them beforehand and bring them all together. Met the Queen and Prince Philip, and and I think I sent you a picture of one of my choir members at home took a picture of me meeting the Queen on her television in this particular show. Anyway, I really liked big choir stuff. It was fun, and there are a lot of things that big choirs recommend. Don, most assuredly, was not a fan of the big choir. He liked chamber choir. Well, he could put up with the big choir, but he'd rather not do it. And he was, figured he saw a way to maybe move off the festival choir to somebody who actually likes it and not have to do it anymore. And that's more or less how it worked. And I really enjoyed working at the festival choir, and eventually got to work with the chamber choir and all that sort of stuff.
And you founded the Philharmonic
I founded the
choir.
Philharmonic choir. Don and I locked horns a couple of times, but this one particular time, there was some kind of a rehearsal schedule thing. Concert was coming up, and chamber choir, which he conducted, was going to have a rehearsal over top of one of my rehearsals. And I went in to see him, and I said, "Gee, Don," I said, "I was just looking." "Oh, you're just mad because I've scheduled something over top of festival choir." I said, No, I'm just kind of wondering how that happened, if we can. And so we kind of got our way through all that. And later that year, Peter Gardner came to me and he said, we really need a choir to do big works. And we had been asking the festival choir to sing, and they came, but because of the verboten kind of thing, at exam time, no singing and other things, students have got to be students. And so at the very prime time for doing Messiah and all that sort of stuff, the festival choir was really not going to be an instrument. So, as Peter said, "Well, let's have a choir, let's start one." Okay. So I went to see Don, and I said, "Look, I'm going to start this choir, but I want to be sure that you're not going to be upset about me doing this. I'm not doing this to get out of festival choir. I like the festival choir. Whatever makes you think that I'd be mad about that?" Well, anyway, he said, "Fine, go ahead and do it." And so we did. I didn't do it to get his permission, but I wanted him to know that I was doing it and not, trying to sneak around in the bushes. And the festival choir still exists, and the Philharmonic still exists today. So it worked out very well. But we finally had a choir that could work well outside of school times, because at the end of April, you're done. You can't be involved in any other things, and the same thing at Christmas. And it really, many of the festival choir sang in both. They sang in festival choir, and they sang in the Philharmonic.
Just before we end, there is one event that you were involved with, which is no longer happening, at least not in its original form, which is understandable. That's Festival 500. That must have been very satisfying for you, the work you did there, because you were bringing in choirs from literally around the world. It
was a dream. The kind of thing, where could you go to be inviting choirs from all over the world, top-notch choirs, to come and sing and share with all of us? It was spectacular. Susan Knight and Dennis Knight sort of came up with this idea. They wanted it to be wonderfully musical experience, but it was also in the middle of the fisheries crisis, and it was supposed to be an economic engine, which it turned out to be. But all these choirs coming together, and the language problem didn't matter. The format that we set up meant that choirs would get together and sing together, share what they knew about each other, become friends while singing. And we learned about them, and they learned about us, and they were part of our history then forever. And the same with them. That is the magic about choral singing. you sing together, you become friends, and wonderful things can happen from that. Festival 500 was a fantastic thing. Now, economics moved to the point where we couldn't keep doing it, but many of, I suppose, hundreds, not on Facebook, but hundreds and hundreds of my heart friends I met in Festival 500 and exchanged ideas with, and it was always a growth experience, and we were always glad to see each other. And from Festival, of course, came the person who was the first chair of Festival, Angus Bruno, said, you know, we should have something that works after this. And he came up with $1 million and donated it to the School of Music to come up with eventually came up with the Bruno Center for Choral Excellence, which sole idea is to be making ripples in the community by making amounts of money available to local people to do things that they couldn't otherwise do if they didn't have that little extra help. So it's just...
And what is your involvement with that? Because
I was the first chair.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I was the first chair. I was involved in the setting up of it. I was the first chair of it, and I'm still a board member of it. And so basically each year we put out advertisements to say, do you want to do something? Do you want to bring somebody in? Do you want to go and study somewhere? Now, this is not tens and tens well, it can be tens of thousands, but it's not a bottomless pit. But we have helped all kinds of young and not so young people sort of retool a few things and meet people who they never would have had. Some of the people who came to Festival 500 have come back and worked in our area just to, you know, keep things going. It's wonderful, and that was Angus and Jean Bruno's dream, and my gosh, what two more generous people you'd never meet.
Choral music is alive and well in Newfoundland and Labrador.
I think it is.
And that's a good thing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karl.
Okay.